Okay, and today's presentation features Daniel Oppold in talking about citizen participation in Badem-Wurttemberg.
That's right. Thank you very much, David, for organizing this. And I'm very happy to give this brief overview of our work at the Agency for Citizen Participation in Baden-Württemberg. Thank you all for briefly introducing yourselves. It's always good to know whom you are presenting to. My name is Daniel. I'm working for this agency since March this year. The agency is pretty young. It was only just founded last November. So I'm basically there from the start, even though I missed out a couple of months. I'm a political scientist from my background, but also trained as a facilitator. I've been active in doing citizen participation throughout the last, I'd say, what is it now, 12 years. That's where I come from, and I'm very happy to work for this new organization here in Baden-Württemberg. Located a bit down south from Stuttgart, where I'm usually at, because I had to go back home to use Zoom because we're not allowed to do so at the workplace. Whatever, not important for us. I've prepared a couple of slides and I will start sharing them now. Here we go. Okay, I hope you can all see this. Yes, so here's the English version of our name, Agency for Citizen Participation of Baden-Württemberg. In German, it is Servicestelle Bürgerbeteiligung. On the first slide, I have a quick overview for you what I've prepared. First, I want to talk about where it all comes from, where we come from as the agency. I brought a couple of quick facts about Baden-Württemberg for all of those who are not from Germany and maybe not so familiar with our small state. Then I will start with a short history of citizen participation in the state, because it's very important to know why it all came about, what the initiating conflicts were. Then I'll talk about how we fit in, what the structural support in general looks like in Baden-Württemberg for citizen participation. Then I'll explain, of course, what we are, what the Agency for Citizen Participation does, and how it all works out. And then I have a couple of information about the thing that we mainly do, which is citizen fora. We've got our own label there. It's basically citizens' assemblies, but in our own standardized way. And I've also brought 2 examples to illustrate how this works out in practice. Okay. Yeah, let's start with a couple of quick facts about Baden-Württemberg. You see on the left-hand side the map of Germany. Baden-Württemberg is one of the 16 federal states of the country. It's currently governed by a coalition of the Greens and the Conservatives. You see the seat distribution in the state parliament. The Greens are the strongest party currently. Let's see for how long it will keep their way. And the Conservatives are the second strongest party, and they basically formed a grand coalition after the last elections. Actually, Baden-Württemberg was the first and I think only country so far who has a Green MP, and it's been like that for 13 years now. So quite remarkable, especially when you know that the first the time span before that only had conservative governments in the state. The capital city is Stuttgart. We've got 11.3 million inhabitants in total, which split up into 1,100 and actually one municipality. the country produces a GDP of around 570 billion euros, which is one of the strongest GDPs of all the states, I think after only two, so must be ranking third. And we are located in a very international area. We've got borders with France and Switzerland, but also Austria is very close. Italy is not far. We're basically at the heart of Europe. So much about Baden-Württemberg. On the next slide, I want to take you into a short story of where participation comes from in Baden-Württemberg, how it all turned out. On the left, you can see, well, how it all started back in 2010, those years. We had a big controversy about Stuttgart 21, a huge railway project which will turn around the railway station in the heart of Stuttgart by 90 degrees and turn it into a through station. Currently, it's a terminal station. It just triggered a lot of questioning whether it's a right to do this project, whether it's adequate, whether it actually should be there. And we had heavy clashes of police and demonstrators there, which escalated in a terrible way and eventually led to the Green Party winning the election in 2011, because Minister President Winfried Kretschmann especially promised that he wants to do a different kind of leadership where there is no violent clashes of police with demonstrators, but he wants to do politics of being heard as his style of leadership. And he didn't just say that to win the election, but he had consequences following. Maybe the most important one was that he installed a state councillor for civil society and participation. The first incumbent was Gisela Erler. She had this position from 2011 to 2021. Currently, the same position is held by Barbara Bosch, which is also my most top-level boss here. I need to say something about this position of a state councillor because it's very unique, not only just in Germany, but also beyond. It's basically a minister for special issues, for a special topic, but a minister without a ministry. And it's also an honorary position, so she doesn't get paid like a minister for it, but it's an honorary position where you just get paid what your expenses are. But nevertheless, she is a formal member of the state government, so she's on the cabinet table, and this makes it very easy to highlight this very important topic that the MP has chosen for the state councillor to take care about. So we might get back later to talking about this role of the state councillor, but it's very decisive for everything that has evolved since Winfried Kretschmann took over the power in Baden-Württemberg. Yeah, on the next slide, I want to show you what has evolved and how we fit into that structural support that citizen participation gets in Baden-Württemberg. On the left-hand side, it's us, pretty young there. We are there to support municipalities and state authorities in doing citizen participation. But we also have a online platform for digital participation, which is very well established and used for many occasions in Baden-Württemberg, the participation portal. And on the right-hand side, we have the Alliance for Participation, which is basically our counterpart, because we as I said, support municipalities and state actors, and they support civil society actors who want to do participation projects or participation processes. And they especially have, well, the most important thing, they've got money. They have easy to access funding possibilities that these civil society actors can obtain. And since, oh, that was too quick, since 2021, we also have a law on dialogical citizen participation, which, well, makes us even more of a pioneer, at least in Germany. We are the first state that has a law that regulates dialogical citizen participation in the kind that we are doing. Yeah, so very important one. But now let's get to the core of it. What I wanted to talk about, us, the Agency for Citizen Participation. It basically has three main functions. And the first one is that we give advice on dialogic citizen participation to the beneficiaries, which are municipalities on number one, certainly, but also state authorities like ministries, or also the state parliament or state government. And beyond that, we can also work for state-owned corporations, like, for example, the German Railway, which is an international corporation. But if it has a project that happens within our state, we can give them advice about how to do proper participation process there. And yeah, so we can basically help out in any case where projects take place from the public hand. Yeah, the second part is maybe even more important, or the very innovative part of it. We hold master agreements with professional participation firms or agencies. You know, our field is, the practice of our field is very much dominated by the knowledge which is sitting mainly in private corporations who can actually run these processes, or private individuals who can run these processes and do those facilitation and process design. And we have just finished this master agreement with 23 corporations. And yeah, it's actually been the largest, or the second largest public tendering or public procurement process ever done in our state, ranking after the COVID masks back in the pandemic. So quite a remarkable achievement. We only just announced today that this procurement process has now been finished in a successful way. For our beneficiaries, these master agreements are a huge game changer, because they themselves don't have to do procurement anymore. If they work together with us, we can, through this master agreement, hand those participation professionals to the municipalities and our other beneficiaries. And that lowers bureaucratic hurdles by high scale. And on the lower side of the graph, you see it's not just one master agreement that we have, but it's differentiated in 6 pools, basically, where we have prescribed cases that we often encounter. For example, citizens fora, which is our form of citizens assemblies. But we also have time-sensitive cases where those professionals need to be very quick in reaction, very quick in setting up a process. We also have one pool of specialists for digital participation, and also one pool for cases where we don't really know where the process gonna end up. We call it creative processes. It's also very important, I think, to be able to also work in those cases where you don't really know what's happening in the end. And let me get to the third point, which is also really important. We take over the whole range of responsibility for that process. You know, in practice, we often have the case that a municipality needs to run or wants to run a citizen participation process, but always has that double role of having, of course, own stakes in the case, and at the same time being responsible for a neutral, for an impartial process. And we take away that role conflict because we are responsible for the process and enable the municipality in that example to be a proper party in the conflict, which is really, really important. And we are also more experienced than most of our beneficiaries when it comes to safeguarding the process from criticism. We always get criticism for the process, especially from those who feel a bit sidelined by it, especially the usual suspects, NGOs or interest groups who say we are the people, we know what is best, and they always want to fight the process, and then we step in and make clear that it's necessary to do it this way. So much about the agency. Now, on the next slide, I brought the standard process of our main product, I'd say, which is Citizens Fora, or Citizens Forum in singular. This, well, is very well established in Baden-Württemberg on all levels. We are using it in a lot of cases. It always starts off with a participation scoping, as we name it, which is basically a round table where we invite all the stakeholders around the topic and actors from the relevant field. And they get together around this table and jointly draft a theme map, which well, entails all aspects that are relevant around the topic. And they also appoint experts and other spokespeople to the Citizens Forum. So they basically send people who will be input givers. In a second step, we usually open up both the theme map and this list of experts or spokespeople to the general public. We do that with the participation portal, which I just talked about. There, everyone can, well, complement to the theme map and complement to that list of experts. It's a very, very important step because we usually, after the participation scoping is over, we get angry phone calls or mails. Oh, you left out me, you left out us as a very important stakeholder of this topic. And then we say, well, maybe, but it wasn't our idea to have everyone on the table because it's not possible. But nevertheless, you didn't miss out on any opportunity to participate because you can still do it online. And this is not only for organized actors, but also for everyone who's interested. After those two steps, we start the Citizens Forum. There we have the randomly selected citizens getting together, hearing the spokespeople and experts, and deliberate about the points on the theme map. This is basically standard for all other citizens' assemblies and civic councils as well. Of course, they also produce recommendations, no decisions, always very important. And then as a final step, we have this public handover, which is basically a presentation event where the participants of the Citizens Forum, hand over what they have produced to the calling bodies or the calling public actor, which is a very important step as well. It links to the wider public, to the press, but also to representative democracy in the first place. So that's our usual standard, what we do most of the time. And now I have two examples to illustrate this. The most recent case was a citizens forum about the duration of high school in Baden-Württemberg. We've always had a discussion going on whether it should take 8 years or 9 years. I think it was 15 years ago, or maybe a bit less, where they changed it from the G9 system to the G8 system. And ever since, we've had criticism about it because it stresses our pupils and parents and teachers and makes it harder to get through high school time while also living a life besides. And now we've had a popular initiative, which is a step in our possibilities in the state to do direct democracy. It's the first step, a popular initiative. And they said we want to have a referendum about whether to get back to G9. And our minister president said, well, originally he didn't want to talk about the thing because he's very convinced of the G8 system. But he said, before we just run into a referendum, which will make this either or question, let's open this to a dialogic citizens forum. And that's what we did. It happened last year. You see the timeline on the bottom left hand side. It started off at the end of September, and the recommendations were handed over on the 11th of December, so right before Christmas. And what did they come up with? It was actually a vote for getting back to G9, even though the minister president didn't want this outcome as his priority. Nevertheless, they said let's get not back to G9, let's go forward to a new G9, which is better than the old one was. And they also came up with a lot of other reform suggestions. It's basically a reform agenda for the whole education sector. And not only the minister president, but also other people who do education politics in the state were very impressed by these recommendations. And it's been taken in policy now. There has already been the decision that the recommendations will be followed in what the future of G9 or the future of high school duration will look like, and also other measures which include primary school, which include elementary education in kindergarten, but also in in university, in academia, will be taken over from those recommendations. So I think one of the most successful cases we've had on the state level. A second example comes from the municipal level. Recent case in Herrenberg South, rather larger city in the outskirts of Stuttgart. They've had a huge discussion about whether there should be a new city district which will create space to live for about 3,000 people. And there we also worked with this model of citizens forum, but you can see on the right hand side that results here looked a bit different because also the tasking was a bit different. Those citizens were asked to put together the most compelling pro and con arguments and also weigh them by how important they think they are. This is a thing that was well done, especially in this case, because the representative body, the city council, has not been able to prioritize between those arguments and different viewpoints that are around. And this now gives them, well, basically a bench line of what citizens think. Because it's in German, let me quickly explain just a couple of them. On the top, the one which was thought of as being very important to 54% is that Herrenberg actually needs more flats, more room to live for more people because there's so many people moving to the city. The second one with 42 is actually a con argument, which says, well, it will lead to more traffic jams, more congestion in public infrastructure, especially in terms of traffic, but not only. They also talked a lot about well, access to medical care to your local doctor. It will get harder if there are more people around. You will not see an automatic growth of medical aid that is available. And then it goes on with two more arguments. The first one is about nature and sealing of soil, which is of course not a good thing to happen. And the other one is about how it's all going to be financed. They say it's going to be very expensive also for the city. And then you see the rest is only good points, but they are not rated that high. So in this case, you see the citizens forum didn't tell the city council what to do, but it just helped to do a very important pre-step, which is prioritizing arguments and also sorting out arguments that are not so important. Okay, yeah, with that I'll leave it there, and I'm very curious to talk to you about what I've just presented and to answer your question, to discuss with you. If you want to stay in contact or know even more, you can follow us on Instagram. We just started to present ourselves there. We will enter other social networks in a later stage, but also just feel free to send me an email whenever you have a question about our work. Thank you very much.
Dimitri, welcome.
Hi, Daniel.
Now I have one question. Do we just ask David, or should I raise my hand? Or
raising hands is good, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Daniel, I just wanted to ask you how the transition, from the recommendations that evolved in the assembly, how do the representative bodies, how did that relationship over the years build, and how did they start to trust and actually take on the recommendation, take them seriously, take the whole process seriously? Do you have can you say more about that process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Not from my own experience, but from what my teammates tell me, it's been hard, especially at the beginning. Like the first time they tried using a randomly selected group of citizens, everyone said, well, is this the Greens just having their weird ideas been pushed through? Nevertheless, they did it. They also failed a couple times where it didn't really work out well. But over the years, I mean, it's been 13 years now, it has developed. And of course, it has also learned from elsewhere, from the citizens' assemblies in Ireland particularly, but also from the work that's been done in Vorarlberg in Austria. So yeah, it has evolved, and now I think we're at the stage where also the what is it, like municipalities in German in the state, they have like their overarching Dachverbände, so like what do you call it, associations basically, that work for their their interests. So the small municipalities have one of those associations, the larger ones, and they are actually big fans of our work, because now we say, or we can really say that we have a support structure, and we're making the work of the elected bodies easier, because we showed a couple times that it works, especially with very important showcases on the state level, like the one with G9. Those cases, they are very visible in the state, and we make sure that there is also a lot of communication about the process and about its quality. That's also why we are able to do our own public relations work with the agency, which is very unusual for a public agency. But we said it's crucial that we can communicate directly with the press, and we can always push the message and push the usefulness of doing this work.
Graham.
Graham?
Yeah, I have so many questions, I don't know where to begin, but I will just,
There you go.
There's actually a personal question, Daniel, about your move from academia to doing this work, which I will be very interested in. Let's have another conversation about that, because I think it's really interesting. I'm doing a piece of work at the moment for the European Climate Foundation about sort of the question of mainstreaming participation. And one of the things that's starting to come up quite a lot is this idea of participation units or participation bodies. Obviously, the one from Austria, which you mentioned, your own one. These are kind of interesting developments. And there are smaller versions of this in some Spanish cities and Spanish municipalities as well. I'm kind of interested about whether you know where the kind of institutional learning comes, because there's actually not much material out there about doing this kind of work. So where did the ideas for this come from? Where did it, where is there a sort of, is this you mentioned the Austrian case, but is there a kind of blueprint that you were drawing on? And I think what's interesting here, and I reflect on this in relation to the Austrian case, where there was a call a few months ago, which was, it isn't just about getting the structures right, it's also about getting the storylines right. And what's really interesting about your case is you seem to have this kind of, at an elite level, a storyline that says this is the right thing to do. You should do participation, and we've got this specialist unit to help you. And one of those things without the other wouldn't work. So there's a kind of structural issue there. But also, I guess, and I'm asking a lot of questions, and I will come back to you on this, which is, what are the incentives for the people to engage with this? Is there demand from the, how do you incentivize the other municipalities to actually work with you? Is that something they have to do, or is it something that if you like, the discursive context within Badem-Wurttemberg means that this is actually what people feel they should be doing? So I'm kind of interested about, you've kind of, if you like, provide the supply side. We can actually do this for you. We can do this with you. But I'm kind of interested, where is the demand coming from? And so anyway, there are about 4 different reflections and questions in there. So I'm kind of interested just to hear what you know about that. But I would be really, really up for having a call with you, and just to sort of follow up with some of this stuff and hear more about what it's like moving from academia into practice, because there's not that many of us who have done it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for those questions. Let me start with the last question of why they should be working with us. I mean, we are very actively searching for the cases that we can get engaged with. We don't just wait for them to call us up, but we scan a press overview that we get daily from our ministry, and where we see there is a conflict evolving, especially in those cases where everything looks like as if it's moving into a direct democratic case where we will just have a either or decision. Those are always the cases where we try to get hold on the mayor or his deputy or whoever, and ask them, well, whether we can be of any help for them to do this in a different way, and to do a step before this formal process starts. that's basically where we got most of the cases from.
Can I just ask you? So you're kind of pitching for work, which I kind of get. Do they pay for it, or do you pay for it?
Everything that we do is cost-free, but when they decide to use one of our service providers, one of those professionals, they have to pay them for sure, which is also a big issue in the structure. Let me tell you quite honestly, because it only works so far for richer and larger municipalities. I told you in the beginning, Baden-Württemberg has 1,100 municipalities. The smallest, I looked it up this morning, the smallest comprises only 104 inhabitants. Largest is around 630,000, which is Stuttgart. So that's like the range that we are supposed to work for. And of course, the vast majority of those municipalities is below 10,000 inhabitants. And that also means there is not much money that they have in spare to spend on something like that, which isn't required by any means or by our law that we have about it. It's still informal, voluntary participation. And you need to tell those people that it's really important and still helpful to spend that money, because it actually accelerates getting beyond that conflict and getting beyond that conflict by creating for the first time a space where it can actually be talked about at its core. Because a lot of the conflicts that we see, which are handled with direct democratic measures that we have, are about frogs or about bees in trees, something that has nothing to do with the actual issues that are important to the people. It might be aesthetics of a windmill, or it might be the fear of too many people coming to a place and taking my seat at the doctor's. And these fora or processes that we create actually make it possible to talk about this. And well, they get it quickly that it's a good idea. But nevertheless, we haven't solved the money issue yet. We're working hard on it, that we can, at least for smaller municipalities, bring at least a big portion of the money with us. This will be the next step of accelerating this even much more.
No, so it's such an interesting model. It really is. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, and it's also very important. You asked about that structural background. It's very important that we are located at the very top of the state administration. We are still a loose part of the state ministry, which is basically the state chancellery. I don't know what the English version is. So we're really close to the MP, and that of course gives us a certain prominence and standing when we're working.
But there are some people in this space making the argument that these bodies should be independent of government. But it's right. Also, I can see both arguments, but it seems to me that that it helps you having that political capital, I see.
Especially, you're absolutely right. I mean, our sister body, which I talked about at the beginning, the Alliance for Participation, they have this independent or more of an independent structure, even though they get all their money from state as well. But they are, formal association. Okay, and maybe on your question, how it's like to move from academia to practice. Well, I think it's very rewarding, especially if it, if you can go somewhere where you can increase your immediate impact so much as I feel like I can do here. That's always something I missed in academia. The distance to actually doing impact, even though I tried to stretch it as far as I could with projects like Losland and things I did. But it also has a couple of personal issues. I'm from the state, and we decided to move back here, my family and I. And I'm very glad about it, that I don't have to travel to Berlin, Potsdam anymore, which is 8 hours drive. Yeah.
Thank you. Really impressive.
You're welcome.
Dimitri
More
is
questions?
next. Dimitri is next, and then me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry for being late. I didn't see the time. So I had, sorry, 3 questions. I'm going to lower my hand now, so it's not, okay. Cool. I had 3 different questions, and they are connected to what you said last. The first one is, do you have an overview, because you said it was 13 years? Do you have an overview of so for each processes, what was whether they were considered to be a success, like in terms of implementation from the side of the municipalities, but also if, as you said, they come a lot from initiative, like reaction to initiative. So in that sense, deliberative democracy is going to be a reaction to direct democracy. Are the people that were involved in initiative happy with the solution, or are they pissed? So that would be my first. And do you have a global view over the span of the 13 years of those outputs, let's say? The second question would be, for the, you said for the local smaller units, smaller municipalities, it's going to cost them more money. But then would it be more logical to do a participatory process, like because if it's very small and people are like, it could be technically possible to put all the people that care about the issue in one room and just discuss without using sortition. I mean, I tend to think sortition is the second best when you cannot get all the people together at once, but if you could, then why bother? So then for those municipalities, do you provide help, or do they have ways of doing more participatory processes rather than randomly selected processes? And maybe also the last question, because you have such a depth of perspective for 13 years, which is a very long time, which is great. And I'm not sure what's your N, what's the number of processes were there in total, but could you, if you have an N that's large enough, do you spot specific tendencies about the input, throughput, output that makes it go one way or another, like makes it more complicated or more successful or more impactful? Are you able to spot, okay, so when there is this specific type of characteristics, then it tends to go this way? Or so yeah, those were my 3 questions.
Yeah, great questions. First one was basically about evaluation of those processes that happened throughout those years. I think we don't have a full systemic overview of everything that happened, even though I know that there are documentations of any of these cases online on that participation portal. We also have a lot of them documented on our website. But like recently, or for the last, I'd say, at least 5 or 6 cases, we have been working with the University of Hohenheim, which is always doing a standardized survey among participants of not only the Citizens Forum, but also the participation scoping, which is that first step with stakeholders, to ask them how they liked it, if there was anything that we can improve. And that's very important for us to monitor that the quality stays the same, and also to see where we can make improvements to the process, even though it's kind of standardized. Nevertheless, I don't have to tell you that it's very limited only to look at participants and their opinions. The more tricky question is, of course, what stays after, and what gets into policy, what gets into decisions. And there, of course, we also just have anecdotal evidence, stories that we love to tell. I don't have a full overview of those stories yet, but G9 is one that works very well because we see an immediate effect. Another one was where Citizens Forum was helping out the state parliament to decide about how parliamentarians should be remunerated, and how high their diets should be, and how they will be remunerated when they're in pension. And it was actually one of, I think, the most successful ones, because it had such a systemic benefit to do this in such a way, and not to ask experts or to ask the parliamentarians themselves, which is always a big question mark for people who are skeptical about the system in general. So, well, I'm afraid we can't offer much more than those stories, but nevertheless, we're part of, or I was part back in my own back in my old affiliation with the Research Institute, with a database that's being created by Mehr Demokratie e.V. and the IDPF Institute in Wuppertal, where we really want to get all the cases of any incident where random selection played a role in Germany into one database, which is quite unprecedented. And yeah, it's about to be launched soon. Can't tell you more about any dates because I don't know them myself. But that's going to be something that we love to contribute and to put our cases in. Then you asked about, well, other processes, more participatory processes that can happen on the ground. I'm absolutely with you. I'm coming from a small town like that as well. And it's very important to note that we don't go anywhere and say it's a citizen forum that you need. Stupid. But we ask them what's the issue actually. We try to find out where they stand, what's also the historical context of the problem that they have. And in a lot of cases, we don't end up doing a citizens forum, but well, there can be something like Projektschmiede for the German speaking ones, like a project incubating process where you help people to help themselves and help people to get projects started from a civil society base. And then we're always happy to hand over those cases to the Alliance for Participation, which can actually fund cases like that and get processes like that rolling. But we're also happy if they decide, well, we'll find our way and we will try ourselves. But we see us there as impulse givers and the ones who bring best practice maybe from elsewhere and say, well, maybe you should give that mayor a call. They can tell you about what they did in the same thing. Yeah. And then you ask about the N and whether we see tendencies. Not sure if I answered that one with the first one already. I think it's always been a development, and we learned from each case, or my predecessors and colleagues did. And yeah, I think it's not at the end of the development. It's very important to state that, and also to keep it fluid so that it can be adjusted. For example, AI will impact deliberative democracy in a great deal, I guess, when it comes to doing summaries and well, bringing all that input that the citizens get from experts in. I think we will see a lot going on there, and it's important to not standardize too much of the methodological part of those processes, but to keep this fluid, because it's the main asset of these processes to work.
I have two questions. One is about the theme map. You said that a critical output of your first phase is a theme map. What is that? And the second question is, do the public decision makers have any kind of commitment to respond to the recommendations of the participants in the forum? For example, to meet with them, to make a public statement of what they're going to do if they're going to ignore the recommendations, to explain why.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the last question, in a couple of those statewide processes, we have had that possibility that there could be some interaction of politicians with those randomly selected citizens. However, it's important to do it in the right stage and in the right scope, I'd say. It's always a cool thing, in my opinion, to open up that input phase for politicians to take a look at it and to witness what those citizens are being presented with, just to understand the process and to see that it's not like imbalance in what they get to hear. And this usually triggers interest in also getting to know more about what's happening in further steps. Usually those cases, as you saw in the G8, G9 thing, they span over a couple of weekends. And in that time between, we can do things, I'm not sure if it's been done actually, but we can do things like having exchanges between people who are running the process, facilitators with politicians. So let the organizers explain where the group is, what the stage is, to have that overview. We try to, I just talked about it today with one of the cases that we're facing, whether that's a good idea. But politicians are also, in most cases, part of the scoping phase of that participation scoping. They are a stakeholder like all the others and are, of course, invited. Like, for example, we just started a process last week about renewing the Non-Smoker Protection Act of the state, which has to be renewed because now we've legalized cannabis and we have those e-cigarettes which are not really smoking. They need to adjust that law. And we had, the usual steps going on with all the stakeholders, plus spokespeople from all the factions of parliament sitting in there. And of course, that triggers interest. And the other question was about that theme map. You have to, I'm afraid I don't have an example on the stick that I can show you. I'll try to search for one, but it's basically one slide of a PowerPoint presentation. That's where we usually assemble it. And in the middle, you have the topic, and then you have subtopics, which span up like a mind map. And then you have subtopics below that. And so it ranges from, for example, with G8, G9, that high school duration case, it was from the students' perspective to the parents' perspective, to what economy needs, what they think, to resources in terms of how much money do we actually have to change the system, to justice in general of the education system. Then, of course, links to primary school, links to academia, links to doing apprenticeships. So basically everything that plays a role. And you can imagine it looks quite messy after a little while, the larger the topic is. But that's not big of an issue because it only just stays on that scale of naming those themes. And we've always made the experience that, well, randomly selected citizens don't have much of an issue of grasping what it means. And they still, of course, prioritize what's more important to talk about and what's less.
Thank you. Martin has a question, and I think we will end it right after that.
Thank you, David. Dan, I'm just wondering, I think on a state level, I think it's interesting that you get into the scoping phase, you can include politicians. But I'm wondering if we move over to the national level, if we would think there would be like a Servicestelle nationally for something like this. Do you think, with your experience in Potsdam, this could be translated onto the national level? Because I'm just wondering, when I'm thinking of the climate assemblies on the national level, it's hard to get the politicians into the room in the early scoping phases so they can be part of the process. It seems like there's this distance, and I'm just wondering, you know, with your previous experience and thinking a little further, if we would translate this onto the national level, where do you see potential? And yeah.
Well, it's basically a question that I'd like to pass over to Luisa, because that's actually what you guys are trying to do there. But because you mentioned the climate case, I mean, it had the usual birth mistake of being a process that's been initiated not by government or by any political body, but it's been initiated by civil society, which is basically a beginner's mistake, I'd actually say, for a lot of those cases. I'm not saying that they cannot be successful in the end. There are strategies that you can have of making a lot of publicity around the process to make them powerful and effective still, even though they don't have it. But it's very important to see that citizens' assemblies and those deliberative mini-publics in general, they are very voraussetzungsvoll in German. So they need a lot of preconditions to be met, to be the right instrument to do something, to be the right hammer for a nail. And it's always that thing to keep in mind. And so, yeah, but of course, I guess for the national level as well, it's very important to have now people like Luisa and colleagues to work about that issue. I think it should be broadened to cover not just doing citizens' assemblies as the kind of how to do dialogue-oriented citizen participation, but to foster doing the right processes, because that possibility of shaping processes as they should be for each case, that's the main asset that this form of participation has in the end. Nevertheless, of course, it's more, the higher you get on the level, the more rules you need to clarify beforehand. But to be honest, I'm a bit skeptical whether it's actually the best way or the most necessary instrument that we need on the federal level. From the experience here, I think it's most powerful on the local level. It still works on state level, but it gets really, really tough to do a good process on the federal level, especially when there are so many cooks talking about the question that can be pushed to one of those assemblies. And I think all the questions that we had so far on the national level were not really enough conflict-laden and salient to be good questions. And I think that's a bit of a danger, that we damage the instrument with doing too much of those cases, where you in the end can't really tell what's going to happen.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that.
Please.
Yes, because well, I see that your work is very valuable when you support municipalities, and I can't imagine that we do that from the national level, especially in a federal state like Germany. You're closer to the municipalities than we could be, and you already mentioned that you have in Baden-Württemberg over 1,000 municipalities, and in whole Germany we have more than 10,000 municipalities, and that would be really complex to have a good quality management from this point, from the national level. What we now focus on in the German Parliament is more to have rather different input for our members of Parliament who know to work in their constituencies, so also on their local level, and get in contact with people there. but get in contact with very selected people who want to come, who get a date with their MP. And yeah, what we try now is to randomly choose people all over Germany who wouldn't have thought to go to their member of parliament, maybe to have their say, but to come and to encourage in a process. And also what we do is, and what we can do, because we have only this then one process, or really a few processes in view, we strongly follow up or review the follow-up of the recommendations and try to encourage Parliament and its committees, for example, to take up these recommendations, to discuss about them, and to give feedback, because we don't have a mechanism that obliges them to respond. And that is why we are still, or we are really in the beginning of the whole setup phase, and that is now what we think is valuable to focus on more than to go into the broader population. But in the future, we are also interested to find mechanisms and instruments, for example, a digital platform, to share recommendations or to have input for the process with the broader population, and not only with 160 people out of 80 million. So yeah.
Does anyone have one final question for Daniel? Well, I would want to thank Daniel for a fascinating presentation about some very interesting work. And I want to thank all of you for coming here. I will post the link to the recording of this meeting on the Democracy R&D member forum.
Yeah, thanks also from my side.
Thank you.
Great to see you all.
Thanks, Daniel. Really lovely to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you all.
All the way.